All right, it is the top of the hour, so we are going to get started. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining me for this Introduction to Jira Align webinar. Over the next hour, we're going to be talking about Jira Align, of course, and we will also be discussing some of the concepts that go into using a large enterprise tool meant to help you scale. Before we get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Vicki Bodorf. I am a business process consultant and a Jira Align specialist with XBM, which is a Platinum Solutions partner with Atlassian. And I'll give you some more info about who we are, what we do, and what services we offer later on in this presentation. I'm also joined by one of our project coordinators, Kylie, who's going to be helping out by sending some helpful links and getting to some questions in the Q&A panel as well. Before we move into our first topic, let's go ahead and just look at what's on the agenda for today. We're just about wrapping up this introduction. We're going to talk about some concepts. These are going to be a few more slides. I don't like to spend a lot of time in slides in these presentations, but I found whenever we're talking about such a large tool like Jira Align, it's helpful to give some background information about some of those concepts that really play into the organization and usefulness of the tool. So we'll get through those and then we will get to that live demonstration. As I mentioned, and as you will hear me say several times, Jira Align really is a very large tool. So it is pretty much impossible to cover everything about the tool in just an hour, especially at an introductory level. We are just going to really hit the highlights, and those highlights being the areas of the tool we find new users and most of our clients really utilizing whenever they're new to the tool, and also once they've been using the tool for several PIs as well. At the end of the hour, we will have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions as I'm giving these presentation, please put them in the Q&A panel in Zoom, and I will get to those at the end of the hour, and we'll get through as many as we can. Let's jump into some of these concepts, starting with the positioning of Jira Align. I like to cover this because it is a bit different than the other Atlassian tools in the Atlassian ecosystem. Jira Align really is designed for helping you scale an agile framework. This could be the SAFe model or the Spotify model, to name a couple. And we really have found that organizations are most successful in using this tool whenever they have executed at least one program increment or PI, or you may call it a quarterly or planning increment at your organization from a process perspective. And we find that this leads people to be most successful, first because throwing a new process and a new tool at end users can be a lot, so it often is a bit of a smoother path for that adoption, but also because we want that process to guide decisions and discussions around configuring the tool. So when we have some of that under our belt, it just makes the entire configuration, setup, and adoption process of Jira Align that much smoother for us. As you will hear me say several times, Jira Align really is this large-scale tool that is meant for large enterprises. It does have a higher price point than other Atlassian tools because it is much larger, and it is designed for enterprises that have at least 500 developers. We do believe that smaller organizations may either struggle with the large scale of the tool or potentially the high price point. If you feel like you may be in that boat, but you're still wanting to start your scaling journey, please stick around. I'm going to talk briefly about some other options you have in the Atlassian ecosystem and some resources that we can provide to help you get started on that journey as well. As we will see in the tool and through these slides, Jira Align really can handle the planning and visualization of work from the C-suite down to the Agile team. You can see that represented in this diagram here. And it really is this robust, full application that helps us align our work across our enterprise. Scaled planning is one of the main concepts that really plays into Jira Align. If you have not talked or attended any training around scaled planning, this diagram may be very hectic to you. If you have done any of that training or you're in a scaled planning environment, you probably either recognize this diagram or something similar. And you also recognize that there really are a lot of moving pieces whenever we're talking about planning at scale at an enterprise level. So what I like about this diagram is I think it does really represent the complexities of planning at scale, while also drawing attention to some of the main areas that we will see in Jira Align. And I think it really helps us map some of these areas in the tool as we'll be going through in the live demonstration. So just to walk through these these briefly, we do have these various layers of planning at scale. Starting in the bottom left corner with the sprint planning box, this is that iteration or sprint planning at that agile team level. We're working with our stories, we're doing our sprint planning, estimating those typically in story points. And that, of course, does feed into box 3, which is labeled big room planning, but we also call it program increment planning. This is that program or team of teams level. We're dealing with our features. In that PI planning event, we're working with our program board, which we'll take a look at the program board in Jira Align when we get into that demonstration part. Above that, we then have master planning or portfolio planning, we typically call it. We're dealing with our epics and potentially some themes. We are planning these out typically over multiple PIs, multiple quarterly increments, estimating, prioritizing. We're doing a lot of budgeting at this level as well. Box 1 is labeled slicing. This is really what we see as the product-centric view. It's not always necessary depending on how you're organized at the program and portfolio levels, but both safe and scaled models as well as Jira Align typically account for this, where we can develop things like user scenarios and do some story mapping and things of that nature as well. As you can see, starting a scaled agile transformation or scaling agile in your organization can be a very long, complex undertaking with a lot of moving pieces. While tools are never going to define those processes needed for scaled agile, what they really are an invaluable piece to this puzzle to help us plan, track, and visualize our work as we go through this journey. Now talking more about Jira Align specifically and how it handles this complexity of scaled planning. What Jira Align really helps us do is sync people, time, and the work that those people are doing across time throughout our enterprise. And we're really able to easily go from that enterprise level all the way down to that agile team level, all within one tool. Jira Align also offers product management, strategic portfolio, and scale development modules to really help us have that cross-team and cross-functional collaboration, again, in one tool. And we are also able to analyze our data and information in real time. That's a real benefit of using a tool like Jira Align, is as people are updating their information, as we're making decisions and having discussions, we're looking at the most up-to-date real-time data. And finally, Jira Align really is going to become the single source of truth for our team execution, program and portfolio planning, and much more. One last thing I want to mention before moving away from this slide is you will see that Jira Align is now meant to layer on top of or sync with at least one or more Jira software instances or potentially another team execution tool. And a little bit of background on this: when Jira Align first started, it was called AgileCraft, and it really was a full stack tool. So everyone worked within just Jira Align. A few years ago, Atlassian acquired AgileCraft and turned it into Jira Align. And really they have found, and I would agree, that Jira software has a lot more flexibility and agile concepts that really lend themselves to that team execution. Things like the Scrum and Kanban boards, the reports and agile reports specifically, and the dashboards and filtering capabilities that we know and love from Jira software, really, really useful at that agile team execution layer. So we do see agile teams working in Jira software, and then we sync that information up to Jira Align, where we're going to have a lot more robust capability around that program, potentially the solution, portfolio, and enterprise layers. Still getting that feed up of information from that team layer, but allowing teams to have those really great pieces of Jira software still. All right. Let's talk a little bit more about those three concepts I mentioned of people, work, and time. What we see in Jira Align is these really are carried out through their own hierarchies. So when we think about our work, really it always boils down to these three concepts: who's doing the work, what work are they doing, and in what time frame are they doing it. But what Jira Align really helps us with is bringing those concepts to the forefront and allowing us to plan with those ideas in mind all the way up and down that hierarchy. So let's just talk about what we're going to see in the tool here. On the left-hand side, we do have that people hierarchy. We've seen this a few times in some of these slides. At the top, we have our enterprise layer. Below that, we have our portfolio. You may have a solution layer. It's not always needed, but if you do, the tool can accommodate that. We then have a program, that team of teams layer, and then we have our agile team layer. And at each of these layers of people, they are doing different layers of work. And that's what we see over here on the right with the orange words. So at the enterprise layer, we're doing strategy, that multi-year strategy of how are we going to succeed as a business? How are we going to grow? Things of that nature. Then we have our portfolio layer where we're dealing with things like our themes or strategic themes, our portfolio epics, you may call these initiatives. And if you're using that solution layer, you've got some capabilities in there as well. At that program team of teams layer, we are working with our features. If you are used to Jira software, this is going to be your Jira Epic layer. And then at the team level, we are working with our stories, tasks, you might have bugs, defects, etc. at this team layer. As our different people are doing their different types of work, they're usually working in different time boxes as well. So that's what we see in blue here. We see these in the tool as well. We do have a strategic snapshot. That's usually that year or multi-year view of our strategy. And then we have a quarterly increment. We also typically call this a program increment, and we're using that at the portfolio, solution, and program layer. And at that team layer, we're talking about our sprints or iterations. They're called anchor sprints in Jira Align. We also have things like release. The green words over here just represent some business vectors that we can plug into each of these layers of scale. So we have things like products, objectives and key results or OKRs, our value streams, our domains and budgeting information to help us plan, coordinate, and execute our work throughout all of these hierarchies. Some more details about Jira Align specifically. There are 2 editions of Jira Align. There is a standard and enterprise edition. All the customers we work with tend to lean to the enterprise because it does come with a sandbox, and it's very helpful. There's a lot of configuration that goes into Jira Align, so it's helpful to have a sandbox to start with. We do have 2 add-ons available at this time. There's a time tracking add-on and an enterprise insights add-on. That's essentially a data lake, allows us to get some information from Jira Align and plug that into BI tools. And just some new and upcoming additions to the tool. We are seeing a lot of updates with the API functionality. I think almost every release they've had of updates this year have had some impact on the API functionality, which is very encouraging to see. They've also been talking about some improvements with OKRs or objectives and key results. And we actually saw a snippet of this in a previous update. They had a temporary release of it. The objective tree started to look a lot more like other Atlassian tools we're used to. So that's really exciting, very excited for that full rollout. And there's also been some updates with WSJF or weighted shortest job first. It's now specifically a prioritization method, which is following the SAFe model. And also some updates to estimation and estimation conversions. And we're also seeing some UI updates as they go along, better descriptions, easier to find buttons, things like that. Usually after I've talked about Jira Align and some of these concepts, people are now wondering, okay, what does it really take to get this started? And this is the typical path for implementing Jira Align. Whether you work with XBM, another partner, Atlassian, you'll usually see a roadmap similar to this. So we usually start with a single program or agile release train, and we're usually talking about 3 to potentially 6 months to get this started. So these are the general phases we will go through in the small green boxes. We always start with planning. There's a lot of coordinating, a lot of making sure we have the right resources, the right people to make the right decisions. We do discovery, learn about your current process, where you're at, where you want to go. And then we start configuring Jira and typically Jira software as well. We train your users, and then that all leads up to a PI planning event where you're actually using these tools to execute that PI planning and then executing the PI. Of course, throughout this, we're doing validation, making adjustments. And then after we get through that first program, we can start expanding to other programs and potentially the portfolio as well. All right, before we get into the live demo, I do want to circle back to something I mentioned previously, which is talking about Atlassian's Advanced Roadmaps tool, or this was formerly called Portfolio for Jira. You may know it by that name. As the name suggests, this is a road mapping tool that can also be used to help us start our scaling journey. And it is now included with Jira Cloud Premium or enterprise instances, as well as data center instances. And what Advanced Roadmaps is really great at is helping growing agile organizations that really need that visibility, shared focus, and accurate delivery by allowing us to plan across multiple teams and align our work to higher initiatives. So as I've been talking about Jira Align, if you're thinking that may not be where you're at just yet, Advanced Roadmaps is a really great place to start. And also, if you are using Jira Align, it can still be a very powerful tool for your teams. As you'll see throughout this presentation, Jira Align does have some more robust capabilities around those higher levels of scale. But again, if you're just starting on your scale journey, Advanced Roadmaps may be a great starting place for you. We offer a lot of services around Advanced Roadmaps. We do configuration and training. And we also have another free webinar if you're interested in just some more information about this. Before jumping into any of those services, called our Portfolio Management in Jira. My colleague Brian talks a lot more about Advanced Roadmaps. He actually gets into the tool and also talks a little bit about Jira Align as well. And Kylie has thrown a link to that in our chat if you're interested in that. All right, with that, let's get into that live product demo. Jump over to a Jira Align instance. As I am logging in, Jira Align is a cloud-based system, so it can integrate with any SSO single sign-on system that you are currently using. If that is a requirement for you, it is able to do that. All right. Where I like to start with this demo is always with the navigation. I like to do this for two reasons. First, it is different than other Atlassian tools you may be used to. So if you're coming here wanting to learn more about how to use Jira Align, this is usually a great place to start getting you used to navigating the tool. And second, right from just the navigation of the tool, you are going to see how it is really organized around those layers of scale that we've been talking about. And I think it's a great way to see that really this tool is meant for helping us scale that agile framework. It is organized in a way to help us do that. And it's got a lot of modules around that you will see as well. So let's kick it off with talking about this left-hand sidebar, this blue sidebar. This is our main navigation menu. And a lot of other Atlassian tools, this menu is up at the top. In Jira Align, it is here on the left-hand side. At the top, we have the logo. This is a home button, takes you to the page you see now. We, of course, have our profile with some profile settings. I'm going to skip over the magnifying glass and star for just a moment. I'm going to jump down to this web here. This is where we start to see those layers of scale, starting at the top, as you saw in those slides, with the enterprise layer. And you'll remember at that enterprise layer of people, we are typically working with our strategy. And you're going to see that here in all of these various menu items. We have the strategy room, the strategic backlog, the strategy tree, lots and lots of ideas around strategy and goals at this layer. Under that, we then have that portfolio layer. So here we're going to talk about our portfolio room, our portfolio backlog. We're working with our themes and our epics. And we are able to expand this here and see a lot more other options at this layer as well. Below the portfolio, we have the solution. Again, it's not always necessary, just depends on your organization and how you are organized. But if you are doing full safe or you need this solution layer, we are able to enable that. And you do have it here where you're working with your capabilities. Below that, we then have our program layer. Again, this is that team of teams layer where we're working with our features. This is where you would also start syncing back to that Jira software or team tool that you are working with so that your Agile team members can see some of this information as well. So working with our features, we have things like our program board, which we're going to take a look at in just a moment. We do have a team layer here. Again, Atlassian intends for the Agile team members themselves to be operating mostly in Jira software, but we do sync all of that information to Jira Align, allowing us to still get that full roll-up of information from that Agile team layer to the enterprise layer, up to our strategy, to our themes, etc. There's also the product layer. Again, it's not always necessary, but if you are needing that product-centric view, we can turn this on. You are going to have things like your personas, competitors, business models, etc. here. Also, in this panel down at the bottom, we do have some reports and some administration, and I'll show you one thing under administration in just a second. Before I navigate away from this though, as you've seen as I've been scrolling through this, there's lots and lots of menu options here. And I know I've mentioned some of them are necessary. We can turn them off. We can actually toggle all of these modules on and off. But even as we do that, which if you work with us, we would recommend starting as narrow as possible so that people get used to the tool, there's better adoption. And as the need arises, as you mature, as you scale, we can turn some of these various layers and various modules back on. But even after we pare that down, it's still going to be a lot, and it can be a lot for new users to get used to. So I always like to mention that you do have this little magnifying glass, which actually searches this menu. So if you want to type in something like the program board, it's going to give you that search result, and you can also favorite areas as well. And here you can also see pages you've recently visited. So these can be really helpful to new users who are trying to get into the tool and get used to it. These are great ways to learn to navigate. All right. As I mentioned, I'm going to jump to the administration just to show you one thing here. If I've been going through this menu and you've noticed, and you currently use Jira Align, and you've noticed there are a lot of differences in the terminology that you're seeing on my screen. Jira Align does allow us to update a lot of terminology pieces. So as you can see here, we're able to update pretty much really most of the terms in the tool. So you may just have an updated system than what I'm seeing. It should have the same functionality. It just may go by a different name. So just kind of keep that in mind as I'm going through this. The next navigation piece is really this top gray bar here. And these first few selections that you see on my screen here, this is called the context bar or the configuration bar. And what it does is it serves as a giant filter across our system. So not only is the navigation of various modules organized in this idea of scaling and of these various layers of scale, but from this context bar, we can actually select specific pieces and slices of information throughout these layers to better analyze what we are actually looking for. So here we're able to choose that people layer of scale. And by doing this, anytime we click into any of those areas, the program backlog, the portfolio backlog, etc., we are going to be filtering the work items that we see based on this selection of the people layer of the layer of scale here. So you can actually see the full tree over here of the enterprise, and you can select them on the left as well. We can select a specific time slice. Again, we have our program increments, we can do date ranges, and we can add in even more like releases, products, organizational structure, and you can even save these under advanced configurations as well. So again, really lending itself to this idea of we have these various layers of scale depending on your role, depending on what information you're looking for. You can make these various selections throughout those layers to really narrow down your information. Additionally, it can be something to get used to whenever you start using the tool. So if you navigate somewhere you don't see the information you expect, remember your context bar, go back, reset it, or make a different selection and see if your information shows up. And for any admins on the call, it does apply to admin pages as well. So keep that in mind. If you go back there and you're trying to view a program or a portfolio you set up and you're not seeing it, check your context bar. Couple other helpful pieces in this bar. There is this checklist module. This allows us to create custom checklists. There are also some default ones. Great way to help guide your users throughout your new process. There are in-app notifications. This does just pull in notifications from Jira Align. It isn't integrated with the other Atlassian cloud tools yet. It is just for Jira Align. And there's also a search bar for work items. So one trick to this is to search a work item. You do want to put the hashtag Octothorpe # here, and then you can type in a number. It's going to show you, grouped by the layer of work, all of the various items that have that work item number. Also in the far right, we have the big blue create button. If you use other Atlassian tools, you're used to the big blue create button. It works the same in Jira Align. Here we can create all of these various work items. Now, keep in mind, it does depend on your role and what permissions you have, which of these you're likely able to create in your own system. But here we see everything that we're able to create. And again, it's organized by those layers of scale, starting with the Agile team, all the way up to that portfolio layer with our themes. And we have other items like dependencies, objectives, and risks, which we'll look at some of these in just a moment. Last thing I'll mention with the navigation is this help button down here at the bottom. And while it seems really small, it's actually one of the most useful pieces of Jira Align if you are getting started. This is a contextual help button. And what that means is depending on which page you click on, it's actually going to change the information it's showing you. So if you go to the program board, for example, it's going to show you documentation about the program board. Here it's just showing me the latest release notes, but it always has lots of links, and you can click the title to open it up in a full screen in a new tab to actually scroll through this, print it out, etc. So this is super helpful. It also works on admin pages. I recommend utilizing that heavily when you're new to the tool, and even when you're experienced. It works on reports as well, so that's very useful. All right. Okay, now that we've taken a tour of the tool, really, let's now talk about some specific highlights of the tool. And I like to frame this in two different sections because really we find there are two really overarching uses of Jira Align. We have the use of strategic top-down planning, and then using the tool for the visualization of work in progress that really rolls up from the Agile team layer to the other layers at scale. So that is what we're going to focus on today. First, we'll look at the top-down planning portion, and I'd like to start at the very top for that, looking at the enterprise layer and the strategy room. While this loads, let's see, I need to make a snapshot selection here. And then it's going to show us the strategy room. So right at the very top of our strategy, we are going to have our mission, our vision, and our values. And this is a great way to keep oriented around who we are as a company, and keeping this in mind right here in the tool as we are setting our goals and our themes. And as we scroll down, we have the strategy pyramid, really showing us, you know, how many of each of these items do we have? How many goals do we have? How many themes with strategic goals, and epics with portfolio objectives, and so on. And if this looks like a really big pyramid, or maybe too small of a pyramid for you, there are layers that we can toggle on and off here with the goals. Below that, we then have our OKR heat map, OKR meaning objectives and key results. This is a great way for leadership to keep on top of how are we going at achieving these objectives. And when we see a lot of red, we might want to check in with our teams and our portfolios and see how we are able to better enable them to help them achieve these objectives. There's also an OKR tree showing you the hierarchy of those as well. And if we scroll back up, there were a couple of widgets over on the right. We do have some execution against our outcomes. How are we going at completing themes, epics, features, and objectives? And then looking at our snapshot progress again, just a really great sort of dashboard for leaders to get a quick glance at how we are progressing as an enterprise here. And you can get into the strategic backlog to also see the hierarchy of mission, vision, values, really the hierarchy of the strategic pyramid. I'm going to jump down to the portfolio layer. The next thing I like to talk about is the backlog. And the backlog is really where we are able to carry out this planning, prioritization, and creation of work at each layer of scale. So each layer in the menu is going to have a backlog option. It really takes you to the same place. And then there's an in-page filter here where we can toggle between them. Let me make a different selection in my context bar. Again, always remembering our context bar here. And then it's going to let me jump to the actual theme backlog. Like other backlogs you may be used to, especially if you are used to using Jira software, it works fairly similarly. We do need to expand this. It's grouping it by PI here. But here we have our themes, and we're going to have a caret here to expand one layer down. We can see the portfolio epics that are children of these themes. We can add new ones in. Let's see, we are able to rank this backlog, so you can drag and drop to rank, and it'll change the far left number here. And then of course on the right we have various columns, and under this column shown you can actually toggle on various columns, and it's going to be different depending on which backlog you're viewing. Each work item has its own field, so you'll see there's other options for epic and different ones for capability and so on. Except for that. See, you can also apply in-page filters here, which can be very useful when you get a really large backlog. And let's see. And that's really the basics of the backlog. You do have the unassigned backlog, so backlogs that are items that aren't associated with a PI here. So you can associate those and then see them in the proper PI's backlog. I'm now going to jump down to the Epic backlog. Again, this really works the same, but I want to show you a couple other things. What we're viewing here is the list view of the backlog. There are a couple of other visualizations, so you can click this Kanban and then any of these views, but the value stream view, you can set up a custom process flow in the tool, and this just allows you to monitor where each of these epics are at in the pipeline, essentially. So how far are they to being realized? How far are they to being completed? And some various information about how long it's been in each of these steps as well. Going back to the list view, we'll open one of these up. And I always like to show epics because they really have a lot of information that we can collect about them. Anytime you click an item in Jira Align, it opens up the details panel on the right-hand side. And this is where you have all your fields associated with it. So it always starts with the details panel. This is where we're putting in things like our primary program. What theme does this epic relate to? PI information, estimation, prioritization. You can expand to see even more fields here, and you can also see any linked items. So we could see all the features linked to this and their progress as well. Here at the Epic layer, we're also often doing a lot of collecting a lot of information about things like design. You can put in a design hypothesis here. You can make a custom intake form giving you information about why this epic was created. This benefits tab gives you some lean business case fields. It brings a lot of information from the first few tabs over, and you can fill out even more. On the value tab, this really shows Jira Align's focus on value engineering. So you're able to rate the various items here. It gives you your value score. And you can also build a custom hypothesis and analyze that as well. We also have a spend tab on Epic. So this is where we're doing most of our budgeting information. They've been updating this tab. It looks very fresh now. You can put in a budget. It shows you your accepted spend, what's remaining, and you can click into some reports down here as well. So you can also see the overall spend risk too. On the right-hand side, you'll notice that we do have other information, the roll-up of information as we've been talking about. So the roll-up of completed story points all the way down from that Agile team layer up to this portfolio layer, features, and then we also have some links here as well. All right. Let's go ahead and jump down to the feature backlog. There is a capability backlog. Most customers don't utilize the solution layer, so we're going to jump down to the feature backlog. Again, everything works the same way. Something that's really handy here is this prioritize button. It actually takes you to a bulk prioritize and estimation screen, so you can do that in bulk. It's super useful. But let's just open one of these up so you can see kind of what a feature looks like here. Again, our details panel just has a lot of information like the primary program, what's the parent epic, does it relate to a product, what program increment are we in, what's the prioritization, and when are we targeting to complete this? So this information will start to sync back some of it to Jira software. Usually in an actual instance, you would start seeing a Jira software button here to view this in Jira as well. This demo instance doesn't have that, but in your instance, you likely do. All right. Now let's talk about one of the real highlights of the tool, which is the program board. So at the program layer, this is where, again, we're doing that planning, that top-down planning. So if you are following the SAFe methodology, you've probably seen a program board. If not, this may be new to you, but you may have seen something similar throughout any of your planning experience. So the program board is used to help us plan our features during our program increment planning event. And it is organized with teams representing the rows here and sprints representing the columns. So we're really just looking at one PI here. And we do have lots of various little symbols here. I'm going to talk about what they mean, but keep in mind there is a little legend over here, and you do have a couple of other little views. So you could choose to view this the normal view that'll blow the cards up more. For demo purposes, I like keeping it like this, but if you're wondering how you get used to using this, that's a great way. The top column here is always going to represent our objectives. So we can start to see what team and program objectives we have associated with this PI and the sprint we're expecting to complete those in. And the rectangles represent our features. And what's really great about this is that this really is updating in real time. So previous to such remote work, this would have been done in a big room with a lot of tape and sticky notes and potentially a bunch of markers and color coding. But now what we're able to do with Jira Align is take that physical board and put it into this digital space. And what's great about it is it is always updating. So as we complete these features, they start to get this check mark. As we complete their stories, they start to turn green. And it really is this single source of truth to how are we completing our work throughout our PI? Are we on track? Are we off track? With the color coding, I like to apply stoplight mentality, I've heard it called, where green really means good, red and orange we're starting to do not so good. So it really is calling out those risks very quickly. The little chevron symbol or Chevy symbol here plus represents dependency. So we're also going to see those on our program board. And you'll notice as I'm hovering over some of these, it's starting to highlight other work items, and that's showing us things that are linked here. So as I hover over this dependency, I see the linked feature. I see they're both red. You may be able to see in the bottom left of my screen, it's already telling me there are planning issues, but I can actually click on this. And it's going to show me what those planning issues are up here at the top. And then it's going to show me some more information as well. So this is a great way for us to see what are we at risk of not finishing, why are we at risk of that, and then help us fix that problem. Right. Let's see, that's really all there is with the program board. It's not that complex, but it is a very, very useful piece of the tool here. Now let's talk about some other types of planning. We talked about dependencies here on the program board, but I want to jump to the dependency module under the program layer here. Dependencies are often something that a lot of organizations struggle to track. That dependent work, when we're dependent on other teams, other programs, it can be very tricky to track. And Jira Align has a really great dependency module here that allows us to log those dependencies, view them on something like the dependency board, but also keep track of them here where we can see either on a portfolio, or I'm going to go down to a program layer here just to simplify, or even a team layer, what dependencies are outstanding for us, what have we requested of other people, and really keep track of these here. What's great is it has a lot of little filters here so we can see what do we need to do, what have we requested of other people, and we can view everything and lots of information here. We also are able to view several dependency maps, and these are like little reports that are really great for us to get an idea of the overall look of dependencies for our program, portfolio, etc. Here we can start to see, are these dependencies being completed? How many dependencies do we have? I like this wheel view because if we're having too many dependencies, maybe we need to look at reorganizing our teams and getting the right resources on teams so we're not always having all of these dependencies. And you can also click on any of these and it will show you a little snapshot here as well. And there are several other dependency maps you can check out that give you even more metrics and information about these dependencies here. The one thing I always like to point out with dependencies is there's really a lot of really great data that we can collect about dependencies. I'll just open this one up. They really have their own workflow here. We're able to block them, unblock them, say when they're needed by, commit to them, etc. While this is really great to have in the tool, dependencies should always start with a conversation. So we never want to encourage people to just throw a dependency in here and expect someone to complete it. Always start with a conversation and then use the tool to help you track that information. The last piece of this idea of planning is going to be the risk management section. So Jira Align also has a risk management module. Identifying risks is always a part of typically a part of the PI planning event, and then tracking those risks over time can be very useful. So we are able to log risks. They are a work item in Jira Align. And right on the risks, what I really like is all of the information you can log about how you are handling this risk. So you can log the occurrence, the impact. Is this going to inhibit the critical path to completing the feature? We're able to link it to epics and features here. give an owner to the risk. And then Jira Align does follow the ROAM methodology. So that is supported by SAFe as well. And right here, we are able to see what ROAM means. So we work with a lot of acronyms in business. So having that definition here is great, and how we actually solve this. And there's also a ROAM report that you can view, which can give you a really good view of how often are we using each of these resolutions? Are we always resolving them? Are we owning them, accepting them, mitigating them, and really getting an overview of that risk at a program or portfolio level here. Right. As you can see from the menus of Jira Align, it really is a robust tool that does help us with the strategic planning from our strategic goals at the enterprise layer all the way down to our agile teams. Decomposing those through the layers of scale. So it does help us with this top-down planning, and it also helps us with the understanding the roll-up of work and the connection from the team layer all the way up to that enterprise layer. And that's where we're going to take a look at next, is that measurement and management of our execution. Before we get into that, I do want to briefly just talk about a little bit more about XBM and the services we offer. Take a drink real quick. As I mentioned, XBM is a Platinum Solutions partner with Atlassian. I like to summarize that by saying we're really a jack of all trades with the Atlassian ecosystem. We know all of the tools, we work with all of the tools, and we generally offer these services around each of them as well. We do a lot of training. We have a weekly webinar at this time. They're always free, they're always live, so you can always ask questions over a variety of topics. And we also have some training classes that you can purchase tickets to that are able for anyone to attend. We offer them publicly as well as privately. We actually just opened up a public advanced roadmaps class, so if that was of interest to you, I'd encourage you to check out our website. Kylie's going to throw another link to all of our events. We also do consulting, so that can take the form of implementation, migrations, cleanup services, etc. And we can also do some custom development. We have a sister organization that's a full stack development company. So when we can't make the tool work as is and there aren't existing add-ons out there, we can help to make something custom interfaces, custom add-ons, etc. So really that's everything that we offer. If you're interested in any of this or any of our classes, as you can see here, please reach out to us. You can either reach out to me personally at my email, you can check out our website and contact us there as well. All right. With that, let's go ahead and jump back into Jira Align. So we just talked about that first portion of using Jira Align for that top-down planning, looking at the backlogs, the program board, really those areas that we are using heavily to plan out our work. The second portion, I want to discuss the features Jira Align has to help us visualize that work once we planned it, once we start executing it. So again, we've used Jira Align to plan out our work, and now we are wanting to actually track that progress and track the roll-up of work from the Agile team level all the way up to the enterprise level. In this example, again, I am assuming that teams are working in Jira software, so they are really utilizing the boards, the dashboards, and the Agile reports in Jira software for their progress tracking. So I'm going to start here at the program level. And I like to start in the program room. The layers of scale all have a room, and they essentially serve as a dashboard, if you will, for that layer of scale. So this one is the program room, looking at the specific program, and again, filtering for the specific program increment I've selected. And here we have a lot of modules. You can toggle these on or off under the configuration here. But what I really like is right at the top, it's giving us some metrics. So we can see that we have 56 features, 320 stories, and a total of over 1,000, almost 2,000 story points for this PI. So right off the bat, we're seeing some metrics here. Below that, we're going to see things like our program load and program velocity. So how are we faring with that? Are we overloading our teams? Are we overloaded as a program? Are we going to complete our work if we're overloaded? What can we do to adjust this? And then we can boil down to some individual team progress. So if you're an RTE on the call, this is a really, really useful place for you because you can see all your team's progress in one space, either based off of story point completion or issue count. And you can also see that team load, again, monitoring if we're overloading our teams. After we get done with PI planning, this is a good thing to check. Make sure teams aren't too overloaded here. We can also see information about our releases as well as our risks here. In the middle, we actually have this program increment checklist, and this is an interactive place where we are able to check or uncheck these items. So as we're going through PI planning, this is a great place to help, especially new programs and new RTEs, keep track of their process that they should be following here. And it has links to various areas of the tool that you should be using at that time as well. We then see the roadmap of our PI. So what sprint are we in? Are we completing the story points as we are completing our sprints? And a quick link to the program board. And then we have our actual backlog here. So again, you can visualize this right here and interact with it. Very, very helpful. On the right, we're going to see that overall progress snapshot. So how much time is left in our PI? What's our percentage complete of objectives? With 21 days left in our PI and 27% of our objectives completed, we might want to start checking with our team, seeing what's going on there. And then our story point acceptance. And then we start to see really how we're working on each of these work items here. We can also see our dependencies directly from here and click into those, as well as our objectives. So any of these metrics that's giving you, you can stay within this page to actually go view, well, what objectives do we have? What aren't completed, etc. What I also really like about this room is while we are looking at it now, we're looking at the program view, but you'll see all these icons, and these are actually icons for each Agile team on this program. And if you select one of these, it's actually going to filter this room down by that team. So as you're holding something like a PO sync or a scrum of scrums, this is a really helpful place for everyone. We can view ourselves as a whole program and then drill into each team and start seeing how we can enable and better help teams when it's necessary. So a lot of functionality within this room here. Also in the program layer, we can view our roadmaps. Oops, right. If we click in the right place, we can get to roadmaps. Here we go. And this roadmap is very helpful at understanding our path, where we are, where we're going. And we have lots of different visualizations here. I like to view this by feature by epic. So what we're viewing here is the epics, and then we're able to expand those to see our features. And then these little numbers actually represent stories along the sprint borders. So you can get quite a big view here. This dotted line represents where we are, and then we're able to view things like our milestones, and our objectives are these little flags. If you hover over them, you see the start and end dates, and there's also progress. So again, a very useful piece of the tool here. You can start to see the progress of each epic or each feature, and you can start to see the shading here. The coloring on this is actually manual, which can be really useful if you're needing to sit down with leadership to actually show them how things are going. You can start to turn things red when you know something is at risk, and green when you know it's in the clear. All right. Next, let's go up a layer to the portfolio layer. So the portfolio room, also a really useful place for portfolio management and business owners and people who are working at this portfolio level. I do need to change my context bar. You'll notice that the page actually told me I need to select a portfolio here, so it does warn you when you don't have the right selection. And here we're able to view one or multiple PIs. I'm going to go ahead and throw a second one in here. As a portfolio, someone working at the portfolio layer, I'm probably looking multiple PIs at a time. Right here in the middle, I can see my program increment roadmap, seeing how we are going at completing these. We can also see our portfolio backlog here as well, and we're able to filter and search for those too. On the left, we see some theme progress. So until you have themes in your instance, this won't start to populate. But once you do, and you're linking your epics to themes and linking all the way down the hierarchy, you'll start to see your completion of those themes. And over on the right, we then have some execution of each PI. So it's actually showing you the PI and then showing you the individual programs and how they're going at completing their work for that PI. So again, as a portfolio manager or someone at the portfolio layer can look down and see that roll up of work from the program, which is of course coming from the Agile team layer as well. Here in the portfolio room, we even have other tabs such as resources, where we're able to see some estimated effort distribution, and the load for each program here as well. And there's also a financials tab. So you'll remember on those epics, that's where we start collecting that budgeting data. And so it's going to show you some information about that as well, work spend, spend for each program increment. You can click into the investment versus spend report, which can be a really useful report when you're tracking that budgeting information. All right. Last thing I'll show is just a little bit of that product layer. So the product room, it is still in beta, but it can be useful if you are utilizing products. So you're able to, oh, I wonder why that disappeared, but you're able to see the effort versus value. Usually you'd see some data here. I don't know why it disappeared. There we go. You're able to see the effort versus value, the theme effort distribution again, and then your delivery of features in the backlog related to the specific product you've selected here. So it can be very useful if you're utilizing that product module. Again, not always necessary, just depends on how you're organized. Whenever we're talking about measuring our progress and our metrics and whatnot, we're always likely thinking of reporting, and Jira Align does have a really robust reporting section. Really, there's a lot of categories you can see over here on the left, and I'll just scroll through some of this. I've scrolled probably 3 or 4 times on my mouse here, and I'm still just in the D's and E's of these reports. So there's a lot of reports that you can visualize here. Anytime you want to view one, you can just select it and it'll load for you. Keep in mind that you do typically need certain pieces of information filled out to view data in these reports, but the help button does always tell you the documentation, and it'll tell you any of those prerequisites that you need to have and how the values are calculated as well. Just go back. This search bar up here at the top, it can sometimes be tricky. It's actually a piece of AI in the tool that it is trying to get you to ask a question like, will we actually, are we going to finish the program increment on time? You do have to be pretty specific for that to work sometimes. So the trick I like to give is that Control F does work on that page. So if you're looking for reports about sprints, you might Control F and search sprint just to speed up that process. But here we have the program increment burn down. Again, really helpful reports for anybody who's working at that program layer, or if you're at the portfolio layer trying to look into a program, you can see this here. And there's even some drill downs as well. So you can get down to team by team basis, getting a lot of that information directly here in the reports. Well, this wraps up the demo portion of the webinar. Hopefully this has been helpful in showing you how Jira Align really helps us with planning at scale, with the robust planning capabilities with the backlog and the program board, as well as monitoring our work and progress and the roll-up of work from the Agile team layer all the way up through the higher levels of scale as well. With that, we will move into the Q&A portion of the webinar. So if you have any questions that you haven't put in the Q&A yet, please do so, and we will get to those momentarily. All right, looks like we have a couple here. Talking about reports, how customizable are the reports in Jira Align? So the reports themselves aren't that customizable. You do have a lot of options to drill down, and then you are, of course, able to use the context bar to customize what information you're actually viewing. But the Enterprise Insights add-on for Jira Align does allow us to extract even more data and plug that into a BI tool of your choice. So for really customized reports, that's the way we encourage customers to go, but I always encourage them to really dig into these reports first, because there's a lot of information. It may just be calling the report something different than you expect, but the data may likely be there. All right. How good is Jira Align at catching errors? So we do have a lot of areas that's going to allow us to catch some of those errors. It's actually pretty good at that. So let's go back to that program room real quick. Again, this is a great dashboard for the RTE, someone who might be wanting to look at things that maybe are misaligned for the PI. And right here in this backlog section, it actually has this misaligned stories. So these are going to be stories that have some sort of planning issues. So they may be stories that aren't assigned to a sprint or don't have, or excuse me, weren't completed in their sprint, something like that. So we're able to monitor those here. 41 is quite a high number. We'd probably want to start digging into what the issues are here. See if I hover over if it gives us. Yeah, it tells us here in the tool that misaligned stories are scheduled for a sprint within the program increment that differs from the program increment of their parent. So we're getting stories off track from their parent feature here. Additionally, if we go back to that program board, you'll remember that this does have colorization, and red and orange mean that there are planning risks. So if we click into these, it's going to tell us what our error is. So right here, it tells us some stories are in past sprints were not accepted and have not been split or have not been split. So it's telling us we're starting to get off track with when those stories were accepted. And some stories aren't assigned to a team or a sprint, and that's an issue as well. And we can actually scroll down here and it's highlighting which specific stories. We can click into those, get with that team, talk about why or what's happening and how we can help them. All right. The last thing I'll show you, because I think it's really helpful, is if I go back to the backlog, and this works for each of the layers, but I'm going to go to the feature backlog here. There is this button called orphan objects. And if you click on this, it's another area that it's catching some errors. You do have to make a couple of selections here. So we'll just choose these. And then it's going to start to show you items that don't have a parent or an estimate. So for theme, it's going to show you epics that don't have a parent theme. It's going to show you items that don't have an estimate, that don't have a parent epic, or a release. Now, you may not be requiring people to use a release, but it's going to show you that as well as a product here as well. So again, lots of areas that it's going to help you catch some of those errors and give you the information that you need to help solve those problems. It's not necessarily going to solve the problem for you, but it's going to give you the information to empower you to work with people to solve that problem. All right. All right, we already have Jira Align, but we might have missed some opportunities in our rollout. For example, we aren't doing great at tracking dependencies. Can we just start doing that now? So yes, you can start tracking dependencies at any time. Dependencies, if you're following the SAFe model, are usually identified during the PI planning event. So if you have one of those upcoming, you may try and incorporate that section of PI planning. If you don't want to wait that long, then hold a workshop or encourage people to start having those conversations and then logging them in the dependency area. Keep in mind that admins can choose or customize which type of dependencies are available. So if you're just trying to do agile team to agile team or program to program, you can kind of customize that. But yeah, you can start using this at any time. And like I said, there's lots of information you can collect about dependencies. So often it's good to have some sort of documentation or training. Of course, there's the Jira Align documentation on the help button to help get people started here. And one question that I often get towards the end of this presentation is, what's the thing we're missing that we should consider before we start? And I always say you should define your process, document it, and then publish it in an accessible place, either via a checklist here, or if you have Confluence or Microsoft Teams, whatever you're using to document stuff, document it, make it accessible, and then just get started. There's going to be some bumps in the road, but having that process documented and updating it as necessary is a great place to start to get people adopting the tool and understanding the tool as well. All right. Looks like we don't have any other questions, so we are done just a little bit early. Thank you all for attending. Again, if you have any further questions about Jira Align, if you want a more in-depth demo, or you just want to discuss if it's the right tool for you, please feel free to reach out. I think Kylie put our email in the chat, or you can reach out to myself here as well. Thank you very much for attending, and good luck on your Jira Align journey.